Hello, I'm Snub and welcome to another episode of the Summer Sale Sampler. Today we're going to be talking about Hunt Showdown. It's 20% off on the sale and it's made by Crytek. For once we're not going to be talking about an obscure indie game made by three men in a shed in Eastern Europe. So Crytek's had a rough few years. After all, they were considering turning into an engine-only distributor. So I find it a little bit odd that they're churning out this fairly niche game. It doesn't seem like it'd be enough money input to rekindle the old engines of development, but who knows how things will go in this day and age. After all, let's not forget about the whole Star Citizen lawsuit fiasco. I'd better not get into that too long here because I will go on a long and obscene rant about the just fucking scam that game has turned into. I say turned into, but realistically it probably started off as a scam and then tried to turn into a game partway through. But I do digress. Anyway, we should get to talking about the game and whether or not it's actually good, let alone good enough to bring Crytek out of their slump. So without any further musing, let's get into the game. And we're going to break routine just slightly before mentioning the art style by talking about the setting. I think the Southern Bayou kind of thing is a bit underused, it's novel, and it gives you just a nice hint of the supernatural while still keeping the setting grounded. And for once it has a swamp that doesn't fucking suck. So I think we all have that swamp level that we all remember, the one that's poisonous, it stops you moving properly. The Dark Souls series springs to mind. They always include one of those awful things in their games. And I think it's such a waste, really, that swamps have been relegated to this niche section of video gaming where they're just this trial to get through with poison statuses afflicting you, obnoxious enemies jumping out of the murk, and the good old standby of just reducing your movement speed, because everyone enjoys that mechanic in games. Can anyone tell me when they last enjoyed a game that made it feel like you were walking through treacle? God knows I can't. But before I get off onto a long and stupid tirade about swamps in general, I think we should have a look at the swamp in this game, and it's really well realised. The texture work and modelling are excellent. It sells the genuine bayou atmosphere with great southern style buildings, and turns the swamp into a nice coherent package. And what else could you expect from the Crisis guys? After all, the Crisis jungle is still beautiful. Probably still the best jungle I can think of in a game to date. And with that little diversion into the setting and art style, let's just quickly mention the sound. This is a pretty quiet game. It tries to make you listen out for atmospheric noises, crows, jangling chains, anything that will tip you off to movement in the surrounding area. And that's mostly to help with the PvP aspect of the game, which we'll be getting into shortly. And it also plays into the gunplay, because guns are really, really loud, as you'd expect. And I think that's done mostly to discourage people from shooting too much and attracting untoward attention. And from an atmospheric point of view, because this is nominally a horror game, it does help to have these very sharp staccato bursts of noise in amongst the generally quiet atmospheric tone of the game. It really helps to immerse you in the gameplay. And mentioning gameplay, I think it's time we go into the nitty-gritty of this game and talk about the mechanics that you're going to be interacting with when you're actually inside a match. So this game is a fairly standard tactical shooter. It's slow, plodding, the guns are satisfying to use, but you're not going to be doing any 420 no-scopes, boys. Blazing it notwithstanding, the melee is a little bit janky, but to be honest, I find virtually every single first-person melee game to have really rough melee combat, but overall it's pretty serviceable FPS, you can't complain about it, but it's not going to win any awards, in my mind anyway. And I think the game does try to sell you a PvE and PvP experience, kind of weighted equally, but that's very misleading if you follow the actual game. Because what you really get is a PvP game with a very thin veneer of PvE. I should clarify the terms are PvP is player versus player and PvE is player versus environment or player versus bots. And the reason I say this is because the only credible threat in the game is the players. The monsters are not really threatening. You can alert a lot of them to just some gunfire, and the dogs can be a little bit menacing, but not really threatening. I never got killed by NPCs while I was playing, which isn't a huge issue if you think about the general milling about enemies. You can either avoid or just kill them quickly and easily, with usually just one strike of your melee weapon. The bosses are meant to present much more of a challenge, but again, I was never killed by a boss simply because the pathing is so awful and restrictive. There's in the gameplay section I'll be uploading after this, we're fighting the Butcher boss, and we encountered him at the basement of a church, and he was stuck to such a small single room that even when he would charge us, he would stop at the doorway and you could just shoot him quietly, because ultimately he wasn't allowed to leave the area, presumably because they caught some abuse that people used to do in the beta, and he didn't regenerate health, or at least not as quick enough as we were dealing damage, so he ultimately just died without landing a single hit. And I don't want anyone to think that sounds like me bragging or anything, because again, I think even people with no thumbs could beat the boss without taking a hit. That's why the AI is just not a credible threat, and why I say this game is just a PvP game with a little PvE sprinkle on the side. However, the PvP in this game is excellent. It's really intense. It's very sporadic, because you can go like 20 or 30 minutes without even seeing another player, and it still remains tense, which is a really great feeling, and the atmosphere of the game really helps keep that tension there. When it only takes just a couple of shots to kill you or the other player, people do try to avoid combat, and you do get some of these fun interactions where there's open microphone in the game, so you can just shriek wildly into the wind and hope that someone hears it. And quite often you can actually get into a conversation with another player and just agree not to kill each other because you're still pursuing a PvE objective. You can form a temporary truce with another player, and that's a fun interaction. I do really appreciate games where players can form their own interactions with each other, and this game does do that, so that's a big plus point to me. With that being said, I do hope that the AI does receive a few tweaks to make it a little bit more threatening, because that will encourage players to work together, really band together to play against the swamp, the ever-present threat of the undead. I think they're undead anyway. Probably the last mechanic that needs mentioning is the Hunter vision, or Detective vision, or Batman vision. We all know what it is anyway. It dims the screen, gives you grayscale, and then shows you what's nearby. But in this game it does show you where nearby players are, provided you fill certain conditions. And it's really good. It helps people to prevent ganking, and it can help ganking because it gives you a rough indication of where they are, not an actual outline. It's not full Batman vision, and it does allow for some really interesting dynamics, because in the gameplay again that will be linked after this video, me and the teammate were in a basement after beating the Butcher, and we had the Hunter vision to spot some players who were waiting for us outside the church to kill us and take the winning token of the match. But there was a hidden back entrance out of the barn that neither of us knew about, us or the opponents. So we ended up taking the back exit while they waited at the front exit to gank us, and then we just ran away into the night. It was great, really fun, organic interaction that creates a memorable moment, and having memorable moments in your game is just as important as having a general good, consistent gameplay. So another thing that I should talk about is the out-of-match experience, and I don't mean out-of-game, but I mean the between-match experience. So you do have a loadout system for your character, which isn't inherently bad. It gives you a reason to acquire money from completing PvE objectives and stops turning them into just a straight deathmatch, which I can't complain. You know, it propels the core gameplay loop, no problem with me. But there is a permanent upgrade and unlock system, which really triggers me. I hate adding those things to games that don't need them. It just detracts from the core gameplay and muddies the water. I'm aware that I'm probably reacting to it more than it deserves, but you know, I'm a weirdo I guess, but I don't like it. It rubs me the wrong way, and I hope that someone will agree that it rubs them the wrong way as well. You can also acquire traits and upgrades for your hunter, which continues to rub me the wrong way. I don't like upgrades outside of match affecting your in-match performance. It just gets on my nerves. I don't like the concept that another player comes in with a free advantage. It's just not, I don't think it's necessary in this kind of game, and I think that there's no real reason for it aside from trying to skin a box some people in by telling them, oh, you can unlock something new with the next level. Don't forget to play more and get more levels. It just feels so artificial and so just like a marketing thing that someone's putting in that doesn't come from like the core development of the game. And now on the topic of things that bother me, let's get into a few negative aspects of the game. We're going to cover just a couple of little ones and then we're going to get on to the big one. So the first of the little irritations is there's not a big community for this game. I did mention it was a niche genre at the start, but when I was playing, there weren't many players on, and frequently you would not see people, which isn't a bad thing. I think it contributes to the game. But when there's literally no players, then you're just playing a really thin, really bland PvE game. So you probably won't have fun with it after a couple of hours unless there's enough players around to propel those really organic, fun interactions I talked about previously. So I went on Steam charts to see how many people were playing, and I'm going to put in the chart somewhere around here. Editing Magic Go. So what we see is that there's only a couple of thousand players hanging around, which can be enough to sustain a small community, but you will need to be playing on peak times if you want to get good quality matches. So that's something you really need to consider if you're going to put the money into this game. And bear in mind, that's during the sale, so a lot of these players are going to fall off. So if you enjoy this game a lot and you decide to purchase it, and I think you would be best off trying to find a Discord or a forum or something to try and set up some games to be able to find people to play with consistently and have some actual fun. The other two minor problems I have mentioned previously, I'm just going to give you a quick recap of them. It's the out-of-match perk system and upgrade system that just rubbed me the wrong way. It does not rustle my boner in the way that I want it to. And the other is the AI just being terrible. And they're really rough. Come on guys. In the footage you'll just see the butcher running back and forth in his weird little meat hut. But we do finally have to get to the big problem with this game, and that's the performance. It's fucking rough. I've got a 1080 and I've got an i7 7700K, and I'm getting like between 30 and 50 FPS when I'm looking at anything frequently. I can get up to 60 when I'm just kind of looking straight ahead and not playing with the camera, and that's not even on max settings. That's really fucking rough. That should not be the case. I can't tell if I'm just getting some weird obscure hardware conflict, or maybe Windows 10 is just torpedoing me. But it was really bad. The frame rate was not consistent at all, and if you're one of those people who really likes a solid sweet 60, you are not going to get it unless you've gone full crossfire retardation with twin titans, you know. But that's my biggest issue with this game. It's just my frames. My frames! I want my frames! Deep breath, calm down, let's get to a verdict. I can only give this game a conditional recommendation, and that's based off the Steam charts. I'm going to introduce the new graphical presentation for the ultimate rating system, the Crayometer. So through the power of editing magic and MS Paint, 9,000 hours in MS Paint in fact, I'm going to bring up my verdict here, which is 2 out of 5 crayons. And the reason I say that is because unless the player base is big enough and consistent enough, it's just not going to be worth playing. If we had a big, consistent player base, this is a 4 out of 5 game. This is really good when there's enough players, but I personally do not believe that the community is going to be large enough to sustain that. So that's my take on it. Be sure to check out the gameplay footage that I've got linked in both in the description and in the end card. And thank you for watching. I know that this is said in every video, but again, if you want to support me in any way, I'd really appreciate you to like the video or subscribe to the video channel, or I don't know, share it to your friends. Maybe get them to play with you. Get a group of your buddies together and do random 2v2s in this game. It'll be great, I'm sure, but as it stands, that's all I have to say, so I'd love to see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.